works full-time at a gas station. So, just a warning, he's gonna talk about some things that touch on mental health and depression, self-harm, so there could be things that are intense here. So, let's go ahead and talk. Aaron, start.
So, what do you guys decide? Would you rather I talk like this or like this?
Hello? Like this. Which one? Mike? All right, cool. There we go. All right, so first, just as a preamble, everybody please Google my name really quick. Aaron, and then Stark like Iron Man. Stark. Huh? Aaron Stark. Okay. So like you said, this presentation could get a bit triggering. It gets pretty intense. So I talk about self-harm and other things that are pretty dark. So just a warning. My name is Aaron Stark. I was almost a school shooter. The very first memory I ever have in my life, the starting point for me, the 0 point for my existence, is I'm laying on my bloody mom's body, looking up at my father where he has a cross-shaped tire iron in his hand, and it's holding over her, and I'm screaming at him, "You just killed my mom." She wasn't dead, she was beaten bloody and unconscious, but I didn't know that. That's where I started. That's my 0 point for my life. I grew up in a really, really violent, dark, and aggressive family. My birth to 5, I was living with my birth father. I describe it like a Stephen King movie. Every kind of abuse you can imagine, physical, mental, sexual. We were running from house to house trying to escape his extreme violence. I lived a lot of times in battered women's shelters as he kidnapped me and my brother and tried to do really terrible, atrocious things. After 5 years of living in that hell, my mom left him, got with my stepdad, and it went from Stephen King to Scarface. It went from extreme violence to crack cocaine and people rummaging through the carpet looking for crack rock. And they were big criminals. They would steal entire delivery trucks that were going to stores. They would hijack the truck and steal all the products off of it and go sell it at flea markets. Lots and lots of crime and violence and fighting at home, so much so that I went to 30 or 40 different schools growing up. I never stayed at a school longer than 6 months. I was always the new kid. We would either get evicted or would have a police officer show up to investigate, or a social worker at school might investigate. Either way, as soon as an authority poked us, we would vanish. I was always the new kid. Constantly had a new set of bullies every school I went to. I was fat, I was dirty, I was smelly, never changed my clothes. I early on adopted a very toxic personality. Everybody in my life told me I was worthless, that I was nothing, that I was just a cast off. And so I adopted that. If I'm going to be worthless, then I'm going to be the worthless one. And I'm going to wrap that around me and use it like a shield. Wrap that darkness around me like a warm blanket. It'll keep a couple people close to me that understand, but it keeps everybody else away. Nice spiky protective blanket to keep all the harm away from me. As I grew into my teen years, I really started adopting that toxic personality. The violence at home, the beatings and watching the rapes in front of me, that it spiraled out into my own sense of self-loathing, which then I expressed onto the world. Because when you hate yourself enough, when you're told you're worthless enough, you'll believe it. Then you'll do everything you can to make the world agree with you. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to be the most toxic kid possible. At that point, if anybody around me saw, hey, you must be a really good kid. No, you must be lying, because you don't see me. If you saw me, you'd see the monster. Because that's who I really was. The violence at home got so bad when I was about 13 years old, I ended up homeless. I couldn't stay at home anymore. The beatings and the stabbings, everything that was going on, I just couldn't take it. Ended up living on the streets, bouncing from friend's house to friend's house, and quickly burning out all those resources as I manipulate and lied and steal. Used all the language of depression that my family taught me growing up, how to express all these feelings. The only thing they showed me how to express is with violence and anger and aggression. So of course, that's what I was expressing with all of my friends. So I quickly burned out all my resources there. But I also acquired a group that I don't really consider them friends. They were more like disaster groupies. There were people around me who wanted to live vicariously through my darkness. They wanted to see how far they could push me to the edge. Right around 15 years old, we would sit around, and looking back, there was a bunch of depressed kids trying to navigate depression without any real adult supervision. But at the time, instead of sitting around talking about sports or football or girls or music, we talk about killing people. If you're going to kill 10 people, what would you do? If you're going to shoot up school, what would you do? It just became the fiction of the group. That chaos just spirals out of control. Coming up to now 15, 16 years old, I have taken to self-harm, started cutting myself really bad, slicing up my arms. It was a method of emotional self-control. Everything else in my life I described like a giant tsunami of anguish, just this sloshing back and forth of all this pain and anger, depression. I didn't have any agency or control over things like where I was living or where I was sleeping. I was just a small teen. I had no control over that, so I was just kind of like moving back and forth in this giant waves of anguish. But when I cut myself, it grounded it for some reason. It gave me an emotion that even though it was destructive, and even though it was painful, and even though it was terrible, it was mine. It was all that I had. And we all crave identity. We all want to be something. I decided that I was the monster. So as I grow into 15 or 16 years old, now I'm homeless. I'm bouncing from friend's house to friend's house, and trying to survive as easily as I can, living off of free samples from grocery stores or stealing or what have you. I end up in my one friend's shed. His name's Mike. He was the opposite life of mine. I met him when I was 10 or 12. He was 10. I was at one of the random houses I was moving back and forth into. He lived in the opposite of the block that I did. We bonded over comic books. Because over that time of a nomadic lifestyle of moving from house to house, whenever I would multiple times in my life, I would have someone burst into my bedroom at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, "You have 5 minutes, grab all your shit and get out of here." Throw a duffel bag at me. And the only thing I would ever take was my comic books. That was my safety blanket. Superheroes was all it was about. So me and Mike, we bonded really quickly over that. Comic books and deep conversation and deep thoughts. And he lived the opposite life that I had. He had a very stable family, very loving, very compassionate. They supported all of his dreams. His parents still live in that house to this day. I was in his shed because his parents at that time weren't letting me stay in the house because I was dirty and smelly, and I was making all their couches smell like filth. So I was sleeping in his shed, and he was sneaking me out food. And it got to be the middle of the night. It's pouring down rain. I'm in his tool shed. I'm sitting in a big gray puffy recliner chair. And the roof of the shed has like wood slats with gaps in it, so you can see the rain coming down. And it's middle of the night, starting to snow, like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I'm cutting myself so bad that there's a pool of blood forming on the ground underneath me. And I think, I have to do something. I have to get myself some help. If I don't, I'm gonna die. So the next morning, I did the only thing I could think of. I knocked on my friend's back door and borrowed a phone book and called social services on myself. I set up an appointment later on that afternoon to go meet a social worker. Because over my life, social services had tried to intervene a couple times. They were a couple of the reasons why we had to evacuate. As soon as the social workers investigated, my criminal parents needed to get out of there. So I knew that possibly might be a resource. So I set up a meeting with social services. The meeting was for later that afternoon. It was dawn when I called them. So the meeting was 3 or 4 that afternoon. By the time I got there, they didn't just bring me, they also invited my mom. And we sat down at a table, big round table, me and my mom on one side, the social worker on the other side. She says, "Okay, what's your problem? What are you here for?" I produce a bloody razor blade, square box cutter style razor blade, throw it on the table, show her fresh cuts on my arm, say, "That's my problem. I feel like I'm at the bottom. I feel like I'm worthless. I feel like I have nothing left." My mom, who was the most practiced liar I've ever met, was able to, while we were evicted from 30 or 40 houses, she also managed to move into 30 or 40 different houses. She always had a story and a way to lie to the authorities, a way to sneak around. She got them to believe that I was just making it all up, that I was just doing it for attention. And they sent me home with her. And we drove away, got about 2 blocks away from the social services office, and she turned to me and she snarled and said, "Next time you should do a better job and I'll buy you the razor blades." And I just that ripped me apart. Okay, that darkness that I wrapped along in with me, I just dove headlong into it. You think I'm a monster? I'm going to show you a monster now. So for the next 9 months, I went what I call a scorched earth time, where I went through every possible positive person in my existence and proved that you were wrong. If you thought that I was good, I was going to find a way to offend you and make sure that you knew that I was bad. During that time, I also snuck in, or smoothed my way into as many family members as I could, got into their photo albums, collected all the pictures of me before 15 years old and burned them. I was trying to annihilate my own existence. After about 9 months of this scorched earth time, where I am lying to everybody, stealing from everybody, and if you're even positive to me even a little bit, I'll figure out a way to offend and disturb you the most. After about 9 months of that, I'm alone. I'm in the field behind Casa Bonita. If you guys ever watched the show South Park, they did a whole episode on Casa Bonita. It's that exact restaurant that I was sitting behind in the field. And I had nothing. By that point, I had been sleeping in the field for weeks. I hadn't changed my clothes. I hadn't taken my shoes off in weeks, but I also wasn't wearing socks. My feet were rotting off of my body. I was surviving off of free samples from the grocery store, or washing myself in their sink and evading the police and trying to evade truancy officers because I was still only 16 years old. And after 9 months of that, I think I'm in the field and I think I'm at the bottom. I have to get some help. I have to do something. I'm gonna die. I have to do something. I woke up one morning in that field and I was so cold. I was shivering so bad, I was basically having a seizure. I was so cold. I couldn't even make it to the grocery store to pick up the free samples I was stealing off the counter. Couldn't even wash myself because it was so freezing. I was shaking so bad. I have to get some help. God needs to do something. Across the street from the high school that I was nominally at, I wasn't actually in high school, I was at high school. I would go to the campus to make sure that the police officers wouldn't arrest me, but I would never actually attend class. Only classes I ever went to were choir and English class. I love words and I love music. I think choir teachers have a superpower. After 9 months of that, across the street from my school, there was a building that said mental health. I didn't know what it was for. I didn't know what it was about. I just knew that the sign said mental health. And I knew I'm not going to warn them or do any preamble, because last time they brought my mom in and I'm not repeating that toxicity again. So I'm just going to go in cold. I'm going to go try to get myself some help. So I went in. It was late afternoon when I walked in. I saw a young lady, mid-20s, I think. I don't really remember much of that conversation. All I remember is the very end of it. And she said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do, I can't help you." And as I walked out of that door, my brain shattered. I felt my brain break. And I felt like I found out what was under that tsunami. When you go all the way to the bottom of that tsunami of pain, that sloshing back and forth, and you hit the bottom of it, it gets really quiet, and it gets really still. Because there isn't anything left to care about. There isn't anything left to lose. What are you going to do? Cut my arm off? I'm going to die. You're going to arrest me? I'm going to go to jail and feed me. I don't have anyone down. And right then, the plans crystallized. I knew right then what I was going to do. I already planned it out with all the friends, the disaster group of friends that I was sitting in school with, that I knew I was either going to attack the school food court or the mall food court. The only difference the target would be the time of day I got the weapon. And I knew where to get a weapon. There was gangbangers in that time. This is mid-90s, it's like 97, so gangs were all over the place. And it was a really big problem in Denver schools. And this is pre the age of metal detectors in schools, so they would come and bring in guns and flash them occasionally. So I knew that these guys would carry guns. And so I walked up to them. They had sold drugs to my family before, so they knew I wasn't a narc or anything. I'm obviously living in the field. And so I walked to them like, "Hey, can you give me a gun? Hopefully one that shoots a lot of bullets." But yeah, sure. Give me an ounce of weed. That was the easiest part. I went to my mom's house, drug you sleeping on the floor, stole an ounce out of his pocket, took it down to him. Like, "Here you go." They're like, "Man, give me 3 days." So that was it. I was set to get the gun. The only difference in the target would be the time of day I got it. If I got it in the afternoon, shoot the school. If I got it in the nighttime, shoot them all. The goal wasn't the targets weren't really the people that I was going to attack. Those were the damage that I was going to cause. But the targets would have been my parents. I was going to make them deal with making me. I wanted to have them deal with creating a monster. So in that 3-day time, I didn't know it then, but looking back, I think I was saying goodbye. I think I was going to people that were in my life in a much different way than before, not nearly as caustic or toxic. I was closing off more peaceful relationships. I was doing things like giving away all my comic books, giving away all my belongings. And again, at the time I didn't realize what I was doing. But looking back in retrospect, I think that's what was going on. I think I was saying goodbye. And during that time, I went to Mike's house and I knocked on the door. And when he opened, he saw. He didn't know what I had planned. He still didn't know until I came out with my story in 2018 what I had planned. But he saw the hell that I was living. It was his shed that I was sleeping in all the time. It was him that was bringing me down food to save me. He was the one I cried to when my mom told me I should do a better job. So he saw the hell I was living in. And he opened the door and brought me in. He showed me acts of kindness. And it wasn't the overbearing kinds of kindness where it's like, okay, we have a project we can get you into. We have a program we can get you to. These steps. It was really just treating me like I was a human. Treating me with granular bits of humanity that I can, like, you can come inside and share space with me. And I realized, like, I can enjoy something. I can like food. I can like a thing. And it was like reestablishing the tiny granular bits of humanity that I had lost completely. I had fallen off that bottom cliff. You guys have all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have to establish that bottom level of survival. I had lost all of that. And by him showing me that I was a person, he put those little pieces back onto that shelf and helped me exist. He's still my best friend to this day. If you see someone who's in that spot that needs that love, give it to them. Love the ones that you think deserve it the least, because they need it the most. That kid in the dark who's screaming out for help, who's toxic and who's yelling, he's constantly caustic, that might be the only language that he knows of how to express his emotion. Try to look past the screaming and see the kid who's doing the screaming. Remember that we all felt that way one time too. Give love to the ones that you feel deserve it the least. Thank you. So there's a second half to that story that's a little bit more uplifting I'm going to give. That's the main presentation. So now, fast forward now, that was 16, fast forward now 3 years to the night of my 19th birthday. Okay? So my 19th birthday, but after Mike had saved me with that point, it was like a trauma bubble, like it was pimpling up, like it was all coming up to a head. And him diffusing that kind of released it, reset the clock on my humanity, like rolled the waves back and let me reestablish myself. Okay? But afterwards, I was also got very ashamed, very introspective, and very depressed about what I had planned. I felt really bad about that whole thing, and so it turned inward, and I started to get more self-depressed. But it took a couple of years for that to build up again, for that wave to come back to the crisis spot, because the hell I was living in wasn't different. My family was still the same, the situation was still the same. Mike helped me slightly by giving me a little different place to live and establishing that. So I did help a little bit with shifting my scenario, but the hooks of that toxicity were still really deep. And it was really hard to get out. So the night of my 19th birthday, I was planning on committing suicide. I was going to kill myself the night of my 19th birthday. I had gathered a whole lot of drugs. I got a giant bag of cocaine from my mom, stole a big bunch of pills because she was a walking medicine cabinet, so every kind of pill you could think of. And then I got a whole bunch of LSD off the street, 20 hits. I was planning on going out behind the field of Casablanca, night of my 19th birthday, taking all those drugs and dying of an overdose. I figured that was the end. And in the day, I was trying to act like nothing was wrong. I was trying to act like nothing was different with me. I had interventions in the past. I just wanted it to be done. I was walking around trying to act like everything was normal. So during my day, I went to Mike's house, as I did. Because I figured if I'm going to spend my last day, I'm going to spend it with my best friend. So I went to his house. And now Mike's a very social guy. He has a friend group of his own. And one of his friends is this girl named Amber. So we would go over to Amber's house occasionally and like watch a movie, hang out, listen to music. She was definitely his friend. She was really friendly with me, had no problem with me, but she was his kind of friend. So we'd go over to his friend's house and hang out. So he was like, okay, we're gonna kick it in Amber's house today. I'm like, that's a great last day. I'm gonna go spend it with two of my best friends and listen to a nice album and then go back to the field and end my life. And so we got there, and that wasn't it at all. I walked into a surprise birthday party for me. And I had about 14 people there saying happy birthday, and they baked me a blueberry peach pie, and I walked right past them, dropped all my drugs in the toilet, and flushed it, and never tried to kill myself again. And Amber's still my best friend, also. I just went and saw a concert with her last month. So, just wanted to give you guys a second. So I would like to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, please, If you think the question might be too personal or it might be too sensitive, ask that question. Those are the really important ones, those are the really deep ones. So, anybody have any questions? You want to?
So you feel like your key thing that helped save you was having this one good friend?
It was having someone treat me like a human when I didn't feel like even I was a person. I felt, at the time that Mike intervened with me, I felt like I was a walking ball of destruction. Like I had lost all humanity. All my humanity was basically refined out and boiled away from me. I had lost the ability to care about myself. I had lost the ability to have empathy for anybody else. That the normal things that connect us with humanity had been refined away with my own pain and self-abuse. And with him, treat me like a person and an important thing with Mike is Mike lived in a vastly different social spectrum than I did. He was considered well off. His family was well off. Never once in our entire life have I ever had an interaction with him that he ever made me feel anything other than equal. And it's profound when that happens. When I was a walking void, I would walk around to the people in my school and say, when I leave the room, do you remember me? When I leave the room, do you even know I was here? And it's cathartic and life-changing to have someone see you when you think that you're inherently invisible. And I think that this depression and this kind of darkness relies on that secrecy and obfuscation, that it's my pain and no one else can see it and no one else can understand it. And I think that the biggest solution, in my opinion, is to shine as bright a light on it as possible. Because the more we can see that path, the less that it can hurt us. Go ahead.
In your experience with institutions that you dealt with, schools and mental health facilities that turned you away, is there anything glaring from your perspective that you could see that we need to do that seems like it should be obvious, but you don't see it?
The biggest thing that I say is to remember that the interactions with people who are depressed with therapy, there's a double-sided dynamic there, where the person who's reaching out for help, it can be extremely damaging and perilous to reach out for that help. Like when I was in my dark spot with my family being all nomadic, you would think that maybe I would reach out to a social worker and possibly try to get help, try to rescue me from the situation. But the possibility of that means that I reach out for help, and then that help investigates, and then my mom goes to jail, and then my stepdad goes to jail, and then my siblings all go to foster care, and it's all because I got help. And so, how much damage am I willing to cause on my family by getting myself assistance? And that was built in, and it ingrained in me when things like a social worker would investigate. There was a time when I went to a school. I was 5th or 6th grade. I was really dirty and smelly. I had the same dirty clothes for months and months. And I went to the school, and one day I walk in, and there's a brand new box of school supplies for me. There's a coat, there's some school supplies, there's a trapper keeper, all this nice stuff. The next day, my parents moved this. Because if that teacher's investigating, that means someone's looking too close, we need to get out. And so that ingrained into me at an early age that help is a negative. That seeking out for help can be painful. And so one of the things that I recommend therapists do to kind of limit that and to ease the area of communication is break small, tiny bits of protocol. Just nothing that's gonna invalidate the session, nothing's gonna mess up your routine, nothing's gonna actually mess up the therapy whatsoever. But just tiny bits of protocol that make you human, something that humanizes you, like you like the same song that they like, or you didn't tie your shoe correctly, or something small, a tiny human foible. Because when you're the depressed person reaching out for help, that therapist is a potentially life-altering authority figure, and the best way to drop that inherent facade of fear is to show that that's really just a person who's just doing a job. As soon as you can humanize and equalize that level. And on the therapist side, it's the same thing, to remember that person coming into you, while they're screaming in pain and while that might seem aggressive and might seem out of line, that might be the only language that they understand, that they've ever been taught how to express that anger and rage. That if when you're 4 years old and every adult in your life is screaming obscenities at each other and beating each other, how are you supposed to learn how to be nice? You know, that so you have to understand what depressive language that they're speaking so that you can speak in the same vocabulary. And the more you can normalize the two levels of the communication, to let the people reaching out for help know that you're going to be okay when you talk to me, and it's not going to possibly blow up your life. I'm going to assess you as a human, and not just a checklist, and not just that I have this program and this 12-step. I have a 15-year-old, and he just goes through therapy himself for stuff that happened with his mom. And there's two distinct kinds of therapists. You have the one therapist where he's like, I don't know what that was. You have the one therapist where he's like, okay, so we have the 12-step program, you need to have a journal, you need to write all this down, and that turns into white noise. That completely bounces off the head of my kid. He doesn't engage at all, none of it, just static. Then you have a second therapist who's like, oh, you like BTS? I like BTS, let's listen to that. 5 minutes later, you get the same checklist, you get the same journal, you get the same procedure. He absorbs all of that because now there's a person he has a connection with. First therapist we ignore completely, second therapist we invite to Christmas dinner. And the only difference there is the second therapist saw him as a person and gave him a little bit of human respect, that you like something I like. Anybody else? Yes?
Tell them about like how you got to where you're at now.
How I got to where I'm at now?
Facebook, you know.
So, the way I came out with my story, in 2018, I was watching, up until 2018, I thought that this was a negative. If anybody ever found this out about me, they'd hate me. That if this was like a millstone around my neck. And up until that point, it actually had caused me to both disengage from any kind of therapy and be rather cold and unemotional myself. That I had a hard time engaging with that stuff because I knew that inherently that if anybody ever found out my past, that they would hate me. It would be, I would return to being dark and the monster again. And so in 2018, me, my wife, my oldest daughter, were watching the footage of the Stoneman Douglas tragedy the day after the shooting happened in Parkland, Florida, with all the grade schoolers. And we're having a tearful discussion about how could this happen, how could someone ever do that? And then as that discussion's happening, I look on the news and I see the reporter asking a student who just left the school, I believe they still have blood on them, how did that make you feel? I was just enraged. I'm like, what kind of dehumanizing, depersonalizing question? What do you think? How do you think they feel? Like, what kind of stupid question is that? And so I went to the back, actually went to sat on the toilet and wrote a Facebook post, as we do. And was in that first line of it, I was almost a school shooter. And when I came out of the bathroom, my family had read it. My wife, up to that point, only knew about 60% of my history. My daughter only knew about 20% of my history. So that day was a big tearful revelation. I had a big coming out thing with that. Like Mike didn't even know the story of it. I had to explain to him. Amber didn't know what happened on that birthday party that I was going to plan to kill myself. I had to explain that to her. So all of these things I had to go through a big tearful revelation for. And then after that night, my Facebook post went kind of Facebook viral, just a couple 100,000 likes and shares. And then a local news reporter in Denver, in Kyle Clark, who has a TV show Next on 9 News, they're doing a mental health week because Parkland just happened. So they're doing a mental health week. And so my wife says, hey, he might like that story, send it on Twitter. So I saw that on Twitter, and the next day, they had a camera crew at my house filming me read that Facebook post. That video got 17 million views in a week. And so I went from a guy sitting on my couch thinking anybody would hate me to being all over the planet instantly. And it was the most cathartic and powerful thing, because the thing that started happening was I started getting hit with all these messages from all over the planet, literally every country, Sweden, Australia, New Zealand, Pakistan, everything, every country, every stratus, every single state. And it wasn't just, hey, that's cool. It was, hey, that's cool, and here's all the pain that ever happened to me. And here's all of my diary. And I started getting hit with stories of pain from people, millions of people all over the planet. And I saw something really profound. I saw that there isn't any difference in the pain that I was feeling in the worst of my spot when I was about to shoot up a school than there is that a model feels when she's throwing up in a cup for a photo shoot. That's not different. It looks different. It looks like two different species. But it's the same sense that I'm not good enough in me. I need to burn myself apart to make myself fit my world. And I really think that if we take that concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we have the base survival leads up to wants. If you can have a want, you can have a dream, you can have a dream, you can have a desire, and you can lead up to flourishing. Take that whole concept and flip it upside down. So you have the base flat point leading down to a point at the bottom. That point at the bottom is pain and self-immolation. I'm not good enough. I need to burn myself apart. Now, each of us, when we're young, are taught different vocabularies on how to express that pain and that anger. Men, as we're growing up, are taught early on that violence is currency. It's not just a language, it's money. If you can be stupid, you can be ugly, you can be smelly, if you can break something, you can exist in the young male world. That's just a fact. If you can hurt something or break something, you can exist in a guy world. So as you're growing up as a man, if you're not taught properly early on how to express and how to regulate that language of aggression, how to regulate that anger and emotion, then that vocabulary will grow, and that tree that's on will just sprout and start to fruit, and you'll see different forms of toxicity grow. And the same thing when it comes to women, from my estimation, not being a woman, so take that as subjective it is. But from what I see, women tend to be more introspective and self-loathing. It's more I'm not good enough inside. My beauty's not good enough. My inside's not good enough. And it turns into more self-loathing. And then that expresses itself in eating disorders and beauty disorders and self-esteem issues. And I think that at that top plane of, if you take that pyramid, look at the top plane, you have the model on the one side. You have the gangbanger who's trying to fit into his clique on the other side. You have the white-collar criminal who's embezzling on that side. And it's all different forms of self-loathing and self-hatred. That if we can just realize that at the bottom of it, that we, at the end of the day, I think that we all want to be held and told that we're okay. We all want to, like, if you ever watched that Adam Sandler movie, The Wedding Singer, I stole that line from them. I just want to be held and told that I'm okay. I really think that's the truth for everybody. And I think that if we can figure out a way to reach those kids in the dark and show them that they can exist in that pain and make it through it, and that it's not a wall, it's a journey. And that once they get past it, then they can use all the things they've been through as learning lessons to help other people afterwards. If we can show that, then maybe we can let them go through the pain instead of stopping in it. And when they stop in it, they get sucked in by what I consider my rhetorical enemy, which is the negative social economy. The Reddits, the 4chan, the incel groups, the Twitters, all that negative social area where you take someone, take an example of what I'm doing, just as an example. I'm a regular guy, I said something cool, I got some notoriety, I got to be on TV, I get to do cool things, I get to fly out here, speak to cool people, yay, that's fun. Now take the flip side of that. Let's say that you are a guy who, in the negative social economy, and you are harassing an abortion clinic so much they close their doors. Okay? Let's say that you're doing that and you aren't sure what to do, so you're started out. So you get tips now from that negative social economy on how to be a better bully. And then as you go, they'll give you refining tips on how to improve your toxicity. And then if you do it really well, they'll give you all the accolades you've been creating for being the worst person. So the whole time you're creating someone to tell you that you're doing good, and you're getting it from saying, you can be good. To be good, you have to hate that guy. And so you're going to hate that guy. And so I think that we just need to find a way to reach those kids in the dark and remind them that chaos and toxicity is not self-sustaining. It will eat itself out. And if you stay in it, it will eat you too. You have to keep going and move through it to find out what's at the end. Because afterwards, it's life. Yes?
Having a kid like you is very complicated. And my question is a what-if question. What if somebody intervened seriously earlier?
So that's a two-sided answer to that. Because I had the exacerbating factor of my family. So if someone had intervened early enough, possibly it would have been helping. But I had the survival mechanisms of my criminal family really did disassociate me from the options of help. Because it would be really hard for me to be able to even accept the most positive of help if it meant that my mom was going to go to jail. And seeing that I knew when I went home, as I walked in my house door, I would see my mom and my stepdad digging through the carpet on the floor looking for crack rock, and then one of them would get up and beat the other one and smash him in the face with a plate, and like all this massive violence every single day at my house, where I was living in that fight or flight response constantly. I was always on the fight or flight method. Like at the drop of a hat, I could walk in my house, instantly there's a massive fight going on. I have to grab my stepdad off my mom, throw him off of her while she's hitting me for getting in the middle of the fight, and then I go back to my bedroom, turn on my video games, keep on playing. Like go 0 to 60, back down to 0 in a heartbeat. And so the what ifs are harder on my personal one, only because of that exacerbating factor of I don't really know how to solve that problem of having a family that is continually trying to deceive and trying to get out. Possibly having somebody that was able to last through that pain of them, because one of the problems was the people that would help would then encounter my parents, who would then argue back, and because of fear of liability, fear of lawsuits and stuff, the help would recoil because you were dealing with a really aggressive, angry parent. And so you kind of step back. So that's a complicated question. Yes?
Of your 30 and 40 schools, what were some of the things that stood out to you that teachers or school staff did that did make even a small impact on you?
Absolutely. There were some that really stood out to me. There were the couple of teachers that really mattered to me were the ones that saw me as a person and saw what my brain could do and didn't pay attention to the shell of who I was. So I was, like I mentioned briefly, I was always going to English class and choir class. I went to English class because my first day of high school, my test scores were always way off the charts. Like I tested super, super high, especially with English and language. And so I got placed in the advanced English class, first day of high school. And I was a cocky, arrogant kid. And so I was reading Shakespeare just as a hobby. I had the complete works of Shakespeare. And when I would go home, I would read like Midsummer Night's Dream and just absorb Shakespeare all day long. It was just what I was doing for a hobby at the time. And so my teacher, first day of class, got up and started teaching Shakespeare. And I thought he was wrong. So I started correcting him from my seat. And he did that classic thing in the movies where the teacher says, well, would you like to come up to the class and show the class, Mr. Stark? And I did. I got up to the class and started teaching the class about Shakespeare, and the guy kicked me out of his class. And he took me out into the hallway and paraded me in front of the open door of the class, and immediately kicked me out of the class down to the remedial English class. So the first day English, I correct the guy in Shakespeare, he puts me down to remedial English. I go down to there, and they're learning punctuation. And so I go into the English class, and I'm like, okay, I know how to write, I know how to read, I read Shakespeare for fun. Can I take your final? And the English teacher is like, really? You think you can? I'm like, yeah, let me take your final. And she's like, okay, you take my final, you get 100%, you won't have to do any assignments this year, I'll let you be my class assistant. So I did. She gave me the paper, I aced it 100%, and I was her de facto class assistant for the rest of the year. And that was the only class. I never attended any other classes. In fact, I would go to her English class, and then my economic class afterward, the teacher kept a running count of how many days I had missed, because I had missed more consistent days than any other student and yet still came to do the test. So I'd miss like 130 days and then show up on test day and take the test. And so that kind of connection, having the teacher that saw me as a human was really, really important. And I really think that the other class that I would always have was choir, because I really think, like I briefly mentioned, choir teachers have a superpower. I think the choir is the only class, if you guys, I'm sure that you guys have seen it too, that's where the depressed kids and the lonely kids tend to gravitate toward. They tend to end up in choir class. I think that's because that's the one class you can go into where there's not a chance in the day that you're going to get failed. No matter what you do. You have a bad day, you go to choir, you stand there and you just mouth the words, you're still going to get a grade. You're still going to be fine. No one's going to pull you out of task, and you're not going to have to go home and explain to your family why you have an F on that paper because you had a bad day in that class. And I think that's why you see a lot of depressed and lonely kids in that choir class, because they can express themselves. If they want to scream that day, they can scream and get it off their chest, and it's okay. It's part of the class. You can go ahead. And so those ones were always the really ones that really mattered to me. The teachers there was like a math teacher that saw that I needed someone to stimulate my brain, because I loved information, but I got bored really easily because I sucked information like a sponge. Fun fact about me, I had minor brain damage when I was a baby. I had severe spinal meningitis when I was 4 weeks old, and it ate a portion of my brain. And so I've never driven a car. I can't put stuff together. I can't fix things, but I suck in information like a sponge, and like astrophysics, particle physics, the geopolitical history of the Mongol Empire, like that's the kind of stuff that my brain does just for fun. And so when I would see a teacher that would see that and acknowledge the talent that I had, it was like a shiny gold light. So that, looking past the surface, because even with the teachers, I was still the aggressive, screamy one, I was still dirty, I was still smelly, but they saw that I had a brain, and the brain was what mattered, not the shell. And I think that's the most important thing. Anybody else? Go ahead.
So after going through all that trauma and coming out of the other side as an adult, how does it resurface? How do you cope?
So that's an important step. So that brings me to how I actually recovered. So that was a portion, that was a long process, The biggest initial process was what I call acknowledgement, where when I went to the people that hurt me, and not in an accusatory way, not to say, you did this and you need to pay, and you need to make up for it, and you need to suffer because you hurt me. No, it wasn't anything like that. It was just that this is what happened. Our relationship has fundamentally changed from here on out. I don't actually love you, and I'm done. And I walked away. And I went to everybody that hurt me and did that. And some people screamed, some people yelled, some people begged, and I didn't care. Had nothing to do with their response. That was not even caring what they were responsible to be. Had to do with getting it off of me and getting it out of my heart. And that started a big policy of mine where I don't leave things unsaid. I am not a fan of walking away from a situation saying, man, I wish I would have said that. I say that because there isn't any other time but now. Tomorrow might not be here, and yesterday sucked. So I'm gonna deal with now. And so that acknowledgement portion was extremely important, and that gave me confidence and gave me more ability. Every single time that I would say that to somebody and let it off of my chest and let a weight lifted further off of me. And then the final thing that really solidified for me recovery was having my first kid when I had my 15-year-old. That gave me something that was separate from me that mattered, and it was the first thing in my life that I cared about. Up until I had my first kid, I didn't even have a dream. Mike would ask me, so what do you want to do in 10 years? Like, 10 years? You think I'm going to be here in 10 years? Like, what am I going to do tomorrow? Like, I don't have a dream. I don't have an aspiration for what I want to be in the future. And having my kid gave me something. Gave me something I had to be a parent to my kid, and I use my own parenting, what happened to me, as direct examples of how to parent my own children. I just do the exact opposite. So I tell my kids I love them so much it's annoying. Every single conversation is an I love you. Every single performance they're at, I'm there. Every single thing they need, I got you. Like, you want to come home with your friends? You got it. I never once, my entire life, I never had a friend stay over at my house because there was just too much chaos, too much violence. And my house is the house where all the kids come. Everybody comes and hangs out at my house. My house is, I come in and have a herd of teenage girls just wandering through my house every day. I think it's really important to reestablish that connection and break the cycle. I had to stop this cycle somehow, and the only way to do it was to step out. So, yeah.
I know you had mentioned that your son is kind of receiving therapy as well. So from what you had gone through in your teenage years and the help that you tried to seek, do you see the beneficial effects and the growth of the years since, mental health is huge right now?
I do.
And with all of the things happening in social media, it's just present all the time everywhere.
I do, and I think it's a great positive. Some of you might be too young to remember, but a lot of you are old enough to remember the age when domestic violence wasn't just ignored, it was ridiculed. When if a woman was getting hit by her husband, everybody said, well, what'd you do to piss him off? That wasn't too long ago. That was when I was a kid. If battered women shelters were you would go there to hide out because no one wanted to see the women who were getting hit. Like it wasn't, depression wasn't forefront. In fact, back then, if you were 40 years ago and someone like me were to get up on stage and do this and tear up talking about depression, they'd get ridiculed and laughed at and made fun of. Like the fact that I'm able to do this now, the fact that I'm able to have a public, I have a video with almost 15 million views where I literally am crying my balls out on stage. And that didn't get any negative. I didn't get the negative backlash. In fact, I mentioned all those hundreds and thousands of messages. Take a quick guess, out of all the messages I've received directly to me over the last 4 years, how many do you think are negative? I have not just a random YouTube comment, those don't count, keyboard warriors or nothing. I'm talking someone that took the time to message me personally and say something negative. How many do you think I received? 10. 10 in 4 years. 5 of which were blood related to me. So it's, for some reason, it just connects with people and it makes it a lot easier to keep going. So, yes?
I'm just curious if now that you're a parent, if you've been able to move on and forgive your mom for some of the things that maybe you feel like she's responsible for.
I wish I could. Sadly, that chaos is not over. I just got a report last week that one of my other family friends almost OD'd on her floor because he was smoking fentanyl pills, and in order to save him, they shoved an ice cube up his butt to stop the overdose. I have twin younger sisters who are 10 years younger than me, and the abuse and the disgusting stuff that they went through makes mine pale in comparison. And my stepdad died about 5 years ago, and I think that's what freed me up to talk. And he died in the most fitting way possible. Sorry, this is disturbing, but it's the truth. The guy died in a pool of his own filth. He was having a drunken argument with my mom. He went to the bathroom, had an aneurysm, collapsed on the bathroom floor, defecated all over himself, and for the next 3 hours, she sat drunkenly in the living room screaming at him how worthless he was while he was laying dead in the bathroom. I can't think of a more fitting end. And that chaos, I would be totally open. I would be absolutely open to reconnecting or to moving forward with that, but not until there's any kind of acknowledgement or acceptance towards the toxicity. I've done too much work in my own positivity to let that toxicity drag me down anymore, and I can't take ownership of my mom's actions anymore. That chaos dictated my life for too many decades, and I can't do it anymore. So I had to step away. Last contact I had with my mom, sadly, was the day I got approved for my TED Talk. I had just done a live TV show. In Denver, there's a TV show called Daily Blast Live. It's filmed, it's shown in 3 different time zones. And I was on that. I filmed it it's a live show for 3 time zones, so they actually make you do the show 3 times in a row. Like I had to do a 3 in a row session. And so I just get done with that. I'm in the car. They actually send here's the scene. I'm driving in a limo because the TV show stations send a limo for me to take home. So the first time I'm like, wow, cool. I get a limo and a chauffeur, and I'm all like, and then I get a phone call from the guy that organizes the TED Talk that yes, I've been approved to do a TED Talk, so yay! Hang up the phone, get a phone call from my mom. She just saw me on TV. First thing she says, you're a worthless piece of shit, you should fucking kill yourself. That was it. I haven't talked to her since. I had to block her on my social media and just, I can't. My positive is too good. And the stuff I'm doing now, she's upset, she thinks I'm attacking her. The family on that side, I had to cut them all off because they're upset that I'm talking. Not that what I'm saying is wrong. Not that I'm saying something that's not the truth. Just that I'm talking. And so my response to them is always, I'll stop the instant you tell me one thing I'm saying that's not the truth. And if you're upset about me talking about the truth of what happened to me 30 years ago, but you're not paying attention to who I am now, then I'm not the one that has a problem. So. Anyone else? Yes. Thank you. I wish I could. My older brother, he had a brother who's 2 years older than me, and growing up, he became the man of the house. That's the reason why I was the cast off in the worthless one, because my brother took over the daily duties of being the father figure. So my brother did all the working and the fixing and the cleaning, and I was the one that he had to take care of. So I was the one that got beat up and cast off because I wasn't useful. I was the one that got pushed off to the side. And so it was that. I haven't spoken to my brother in years. And my 2 little sisters, I wish I could. They're 10 years younger than me. And currently, my mom is living with one of my sisters who since the age of 14 was a prostitute. And from 14 to 19, my mom and my stepdad were living off of her. And my stepdad was her pimp. And the overdose that happened was because my sister was giving him drugs. So I try, but one day I hope to, with my sisters especially, one day I hope to reconnect and help with that, but I can't right now. It's an important line to draw between helping someone and making sure that your own positivity is intact. And it's no use. It's like they say in an airplane, when the oxygen mask drops down, you have to breathe in yourself first before you can help anybody else. And they haven't taken any oxygen. So. Anybody else? All right, well, it looks like that's it. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate you having me. If anybody has any questions or anything afterwards, go ahead and come out of the box. One last bit of business, please, if you can, look up my Facebook group. Out of all those responses, I started a Facebook group called You Are Not Alone. It's all one word, titled with each word capitalized, You Are Not Alone. The logo has a bunch of colored hands, so if you look on Facebook, that's my group. That group has over about 3,000 members from all over the planet, and it's the thing I'm most proud of from what I'm doing now, because that group has become a self-perpetuating positivity machine that has prevented over 30 suicides, has prevented over 3 school shootings, and has helped multiple people leave white nationalism. So that is my goal. That's my main prize. So if you guys want to look up your own alone and find that. But thank you guys. I really appreciate it. It was been a very honor speaking to you guys. Thank you.